St. Joseph's Industrial School today. And as you can see, this is the view that you guys see every day when you come to school. Okay. So, basically, St. Joe's was the brainchild of Father de Ruyter. He was a young seminarian from the Philadelphia area. It was his mission to give underprivileged children, basically, an opportunity for a better education. So the Josephites is probably a sect of the Catholic Church that you've never even heard of. They were named after Jesus' father, St. Joseph. And basically, that was to kind of give the idea that the Josephites were the protectors, the fathers of these young children. So the entire sect is dedicated, and I hope I'm not using that term incorrectly because I am not a Catholic by any means, but the entire sect of the St. Josephites, that was their main and only goal, was to help underprivileged children, so African Americans, but also Native American children. They were created right after the Civil War. So when all the slaves were, had been freed, and there all these children that were, living in poverty. So the whole idea was to give these young people from disadvantaged youth an opportunity for a better education. He started a small school of some type up in Philadelphia, but he immediately realized that it wasn't going to have enough services for what he wanted to do. So he came down here and he found this area. Now this original property was actually a governor's mansion and estate. So it was Governor Clayton's mansion that they purchased. So they purchased that property. I think originally it was like 10 acres, but then they continued to acquire more acreage as time went on, and they basically came down here to start a school. Now, Father de Ruyter actually died before the school actually opened. He was in Philadelphia on a train, and he was coming back to Clayton, and he died right there in the train station of a heart attack. So, yeah. So, and he was a great-looking guy. It's kind of sad. Of course, he was a priest, so it wouldn't have made any difference. But so, yep. Next slide. So here is an older picture, and you'll notice this is not here anymore. It used to have a bell tower. Providence Creek took that down because it was structurally unsound when they took over the property and were revamping it. So, but yeah, these are all, and I apologize, I didn't memorize them all, but they're all sayings and certain things on the thing that, as I say, I haven't memorized. I don't have that kind of mind. Yep. So in the spring of 1895, Father de Ruyter purchased was 200 acres, a farm in Clayton. As I said, it had the original governor's mansion on it, Governor Clayton's mansion on it. He had 25 boys, ages 10 to 17, that he brought with him down from Wilmington. These boys were going to help build the school, actually build the buildings for the school. And the funding came from Mother Catherine Drexel and her sister, Mrs. Louise Morel. So they came from an uber wealthy family. The parents had died early, so Catherine Drexel and her sister Louise had all this money and all this desire to help people, and they didn't have any impediments whatsoever. So they just started giving money. Catherine actually went to Rome and had an audience with the Pope, and she was asking for help from the Catholic Church in order to create these schools, fund these schools, man the schools. And the Pope told her that he would help her out if she became a nun. So she did. Can you imagine? Yeah, so she became a nun, and she and her sister, actually, next slide. There we go. It was, she founded a Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, again, the Josephites, for Indians and colored people in 1891, financed the school for African American boys, which occupied 6 buildings originally. So this property had 6 buildings on it originally. Paid for the chapel. It is an Italianate basilica formed chapel, by the way. That's why its odd architecture is so unique to this area. So for 82 years, St. Joseph's was run by the Catholic Society in Baltimore, and they educated some 7,000 students during that time. Now, the school itself, if you talk to older residents, they'll tell you that the running of the school was like a mystery, because it was basically a boys' school, a boys' boarding school. So the kids came here, they stayed here on this property pretty much until the end of the school year, and then they went home. So the residents never really saw them very much. Occasionally, they would walk to town, not that there's much in Clayton to walk to, but they would walk to town. And when they did that, there would be a brother in the front and a brother in the rear, and then all the kids would walk in a line. And so they were really, really insulated from Clayton society. So for a lot of Clayton residents, the school was very mysterious. They were like, we have no idea what's going on there. But it was really, actually, it was a wonderful institution from everyone that I've ever spoken with. It closed in 1972. I was told that it closed in 1972 because that was the era of desegregation. Unfortunately, you guys weren't even a twinkle in your parents' eyes at that point, but I grew up during that period, and it was basically, there were all these factions, white were over here, black were over there, and the federal government just came along and said, nope, we're going to mix everyone up, we're going to force them to mix up. So they would take white kids and bust them into black neighborhoods, and black kids and bust them into white neighborhoods. It's like, you're going to be desegregated, we said so. So it was a really tense period of time, not unlike this period of time. And the Catholic school decided that a school dedicated to only African American boys was probably not a good political statement to make during that time period. I think also, as you'll see in a little bit, that there was some financial things going on at that time as well. So, all right, next slide. So there's your aerial view. There's Drexel, Morel, the chapel, and of course St. Michael's. Now those buildings, by the way, are younger buildings. The original buildings that were on the property, the ones that DeRuyter and his kids put up, were all wood-framed buildings. Now remember, this is a period of time, 1890s, when you're cooking with fire, right? You're warming with fire. What does fire and wood do? It burns. So they built those. They built the brick structures because they wouldn't be as likely to burn down. So here are our 2 sisters, Louise Morel. That's her married name, by the way. The original family name is Drexel, right? So Louise Morel and Catherine Drexel, and there was a 3rd sister, by the way. Catherine Drexel, I don't know if you know this, but she was actually made a saint in around the year 2000. Yes, so she's actually been sainted. Yeah, I was amazed. All right. So, yeah, I didn't know that until just recently, but yes. Apparently she is known for to become a saint, you have to have performed a certain amount of miracles. It's all very orderly in the Catholic Church. So, so she had one during her life where she healed someone's hearing. Someone who was a child that was deaf, she healed their hearing. And then once after she died, there was a death child, and they prayed over the death child, and then they rubbed some of Catherine Drexel's personal belongings on the deaf child, and the deaf child's hearing went away, or deafness went away, and so they said, oh, well, that's 2 miracles for Catherine. She's a saint now, so I don't know. The Catholic Church kind of cracks me up. Do things strangely, yeah. But anyway, yeah. Oh, you got your 2 now. You're good to go. Of course, you're dead, but but oh well. So during her lifetime, she established 12 high schools, 49 elementary schools, Xavier University, and she established 51 convents through her Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. It was at 500 members at one point. Gee. Yeah, I know. What a powerhouse, huh? Yeah. So she was beatified. I have no idea what that means. In 1988, after the Vatican confirmed her first miracle, and then her second miracle was attributed to her in January of 2000. Again, a young girl was cured of her deafness, and so Pope John Paul II approved her for sainthood, and she was canonized in October 2000. Weird. Second U.S. born saint. We have 2. Who knew? So this is Morel Hall, obviously named for Louise Morel. And there's St. Catherine's Chapel. Now that, I guess, was the original name of the chapel. It was St. Catherine's, named after Catherine. They shared the chapel with another Catholic church. So in the mornings, for example, I think the boys at the boys' school went to Mass first, and then the Catholic church, the Catholic congregation in the area would use the chapel second. And that was St. Polycarp's. And so St. Polycarp's in the early 70s, really early 70s, built a church of their own. And they moved out to Smyrna, yeah. So unfortunately, they took their money with them, right? Yeah. So I have a sneaking suspicion that that's part of the reason that the school closed in 1972, because once they moved out of to St. Polycarp's, all their collections, right, went to that building, and not to the boys. Yeah. So in 2 years' time, there was a need for more space due to more pupils wanting to attend the school. So in 1895, 2 additional farms were purchased, making the campus over 400 acres big. And they grew everything. I mean, it was a full functioning farm that they had. They had pigs, they had cows, they had chickens. They raised different crops. So it was a fully functioning farm. They would sell the dairy, they would sell off the eggs, to make up for some of the money that they were spending on the boys. But yeah, it was a full functioning farm. So, and this is our Father Brown, and one graduation, I think it was sometime in the 60s. And there is, by the way, a reunion of the guys that went there. All of the students that went to St. Joe's that I've done interviews with absolutely loved it. They live predominantly in like Washington, D.C. Those are the ones that I've spoken with. They would take them out of the very depths of Washington, downtown Washington, D.C. and then plant them here in Clayton. I'm sure they never saw a horse or a pig in their lives until they arrived here. So they come back. So they will make pilgrimages. It's like the Mecca for them. So they'll come back and visit the school just because they just love their time here.
I have a question. Mm-hmm. Who is the person on the end in the black and white photo?
I don't know. I don't know him. I know the one in the center is Father Brown, though.
Mm-hmm. There's a graveyard, too.
There is a graveyard, yep. It has priests, it has the brothers, and it has some lay people. I've been told that people that worked here, if they passed away, they could be put it back there, yep. So here's a plat map from 1923, and you can see all the different buildings. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Morel, or Drexel's not here yet. Morel's not here. Yeah, really quite different, isn't it?
So, what is that bit at the top left?
Industrial something.
Oh yeah, St. Joseph's Industrial School is probably what it's saying, because that was the original name, right there. Yeah. Hot water, lights, electrical.
So each inch on that map is 100 feet. Lord. That's a big area for a school.
It's huge. As I said, that they were a lot of their support came from that farm. Well, they didn't burn them down; they burnt down on their own, including the governor's mansion. So in August of 1896, Father de Ruyter finally, sadly died of a sudden heart attack. He was only 42 years old. He didn't get to see his dream come to fruition. As I said before, he was at the railroad station returning home from, he was coming home from Wilmington. Okay. There were a number of schools, by the way, not just St. Joseph's, but they had, the Josephites had schools in Philadelphia, here, Baltimore, I believe. So there were several of these schools for African boys or African American boys in the area. So there's Father de Ruyter. He's now buried. He was buried next to the chapel, but they dug him up in 1926 and moved him back to the cemetery back there. So he's actually back there, yeah.
I always got weird vibes back there.
Yeah, so did I.
Ever since I was a kid, like I went to PCA.
Oh, okay.
From kindergarten to 8th grade.
Oh, okay.
That was my elementary through middle school, like entire career. So we would go back there a lot and just like go to the pond back there for like science experiments or what have you.
Yeah, yeah.
And we would always pass by that graveyard, and I'd always get a feeling, and everybody would always want to go over there. But like, no, I'm gonna stay over here where I know.
Take my pond sample. Grab my frog.
Like whenever we do the 5K last year, I would always be like, that is so.
Pass over there. Oh my gosh. Always
Yeah, I just
always got
walked
vibes.
through it. And I was like, no, I'm good.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
So here's one of the original farm boys' dormitories, rather, and you can see it was all wood. So basically, they would live in big rooms with beds, all in a row, and then a brother would live in a room, a small bedroom of his own, right next to the dorm, so he could overlook the boys during the night. So if you got out of bed to use the bathroom, he'd be like, you do what you need to do, and you get right back here. So yeah, it was the brothers, by the way, that did everything with the boys. It wasn't the priests. I didn't understand that myself, but the priests ran the masses. They ran the school, financial. There was a priest that was actually the principal, but there were a whole band of brothers, and you would volunteer for this way of life. So they were always looking for young men that would, give up basically a life of their own to come to a school like this and basically spend 24/7 with boys. Yeah, so they taught all the classes. They made the food. They did all the extracurricular activities, and then, as I say, they slept with the boys at night. So it was a 24/7 a day job for these guys. Yeah, talk about dedication, huh? So these were apparently some of the regulations at the beginning. Students were not accepted unless they had a return car fare. I know from the gentleman that I did the interview with that went here during the 60s that there was actually a bus that would take them back home. So they would summer back home in DC or Philadelphia, and then they would come back during the start of the school year, and they would basically live here until until the school year was over. I'm sure they went home at Christmas, and then they had buses that would take them back and forth. Did you have a question?
No, that's just insane. Because like, could you imagine not being able to like it says at the bottom, you could have visitor, but you couldn't go home. But they kind of like, were they like, I guess you could say this was like their only way to get education back then, the Indians and colors. This was their only way to get education.
Well, you got to remember now, this school was open for 80 years. A lot changed in 80 years. But so the gentlemen that I did the interviews with were from the 60s, which is obviously really, really different from 1895 when they had just been emancipated. Mm-hmm. So, but all the guys that I interviewed, that I spoke with, they're growing up in downtown, Washington D.C. Single parent, families, single parent. One of them was being raised by his grandmother. Absolutely knew no discipline whatsoever. We're getting in with the wrong crowds, going out and doing things. So basically their parents would say, nope, you're going to St. Joe's. And so they would pack them up on the bus and send them here. Now, inner city Washington, D.C., Clayton, Delaware. Can you imagine? They must have thought they had landed on the moon.
That's like what if like we were to go to like New York City, like downtown Manhattan.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
That's crazy.
Never saw a farm animal in their life. Never, never put a seed in the ground. Never, And all of a sudden, they're living with Catholics, and they have discipline in their lives on top of everything else. So there was a lot of boys that were homesick, that were running away. Some of them actually achieved it. How you would run away from Clayton, Delaware and get all the way to Washington, D.C., it would take some ingenuity, wouldn't it? Apparently, sometimes they would jump the train and skedaddle that way. Yep. Other times they just tried to do it by foot. So when they had runaways, they would catch them. Most of the time they did, and they'd try to bring them back here. Any of you guys ever do a summer camp? Mm-hmm. When you were young? Yeah, in the first 2 days of summer camp, you're like, right, you're terribly homesick. So these guys would, arrive, no family, no friends, in the middle of nowhere, and they were terribly homesick. And then, as I say, they were growing up in families, in houses with where they had no chores, where they had, no expectations. And so all of a sudden, James, you have to clean the dormitory today, and Joe, you have to go to the kitchen and help make lunch. And so, they're doing chores. A lot of them didn't like that. They like being lazy. So, so there was a big adjustment for them. But once they got over being homesick, and they started taking on responsibilities, they really started to blossom, and they started to love it. I had one man, it actually brought a tear to my eye, because he's telling me he's growing up in just this type of home. He comes here, they tell him he's got all these chores to do. He's like, oh, hell no. And he just doesn't do them. And he lets everyone else do all the work for him, and he's just hanging out. And one of the brothers finally pulls him over, and he sits him down, doesn't hurt him, doesn't call him names, doesn't get angry. He said, he just sat me down, and for the first time in my life, I had a man-to-man conversation with an adult. He had no father, no male influence in his life at all. And the guy just laid it out. You're expected to do this. You're going to man up and do it, and do what you're expected to do. And he said it was heart-wrenching for him, because he'd never had that before. So it really made a difference in his life. By the way, this was a middle school. I don't know if I said that, but it's 5, 6, 7, and 8 only. So yeah, by the time they hit high school, they were back in wherever, D.C. or Philadelphia or New York. So apparently at one point they were required to pay $5 a month by parents to repair their clothing, their shoes, their school books, athletic goods, musical instruments. They had to bring their own underwear, dress clothes, working clothes, and shoes were apparently provided by the school. So here's one of our dining rooms. By the way, if they didn't want to work the farms, they didn't have to. That was actually, from my interviews, that was kind of a privilege. You know, they had to actually ask to work with the animals, or and they also did a thing at the end of the growing season where they would go out and they grew hay. Obviously, they had to feed the animals, so they would get all the hay together, bale it all up, put it on a tractor, and all the boys would have a big old fun hay ride back to school.
Lifting
they
hay
said,
bales is not easy.
no, but the hay ride's fun.
The hay ride's fun, but lifting the hay bales is not fun.
Yeah, I know. I've done that myself. But so I spoke with one guy. He used to take care of, his special job was taking care of the calves, which he just loved. I love calves, so I know I would. Another one took care of the hogs. They did have working staff on the farm, though, that did that work all the time. So they had a whole staff that were farm hands, basically. And the boys only just kind of did the light lifting, if you will. So there were 50 cows in the dairy herd. The morning milk was sold for profit. The evening milk was for the boys, and it was used to make butter. They would also receive coffee. Fruits and vegetables were grown and preserved for all year consumption. They did have horses at one point. Apparently they got 2 or 3 retired New York police horses. You know, the big, beautiful ones? Yeah, they had those out here. So, and I know not only did the boys love them, but they would often let the resident kids come over and ride the horses as well. Apparently they were placid as lap dogs. They were just wonderful animals. So huge but sweet. There's our convent and shrine. There's the original gymnasium. As I said, the farm was once the mansion of U.S. Senator John M. Clayton. They used the original house, the mansion basically, was for the rectory, so the priests lived in that building. And that's a picture of it. Beautiful.